Good afternoon, one and all. Thank you to all those who have remained in this late afternoon hour. The minister knows. And just for full disclosure, I have known Gideon Saar for many years. I'm not going to say how many years. And I'm very happy that he's here and that I can ask him several questions and to share with the audience here some insights. And let's get to it. Honorable Minister, in recent years, we have been experiencing what some say, in euphemism, loss of governance and loss of privacy in many areas in Israel. For instance, it is difficult to travel in the roads in the south. We see protection, we see fires. In the southern part of Israel, we see that the agriculture segment is being hurt. And how did this happen? Not in order to blame or finger point, but in order to know what to do in order to go back to normalcy as far as Israel can be a normal country. Well, I think that when we look at our priorities, this is certainly one of the biggest problems Israel is facing. I think it's an even greater priority than external threats. There is a perception, and you talked about protection, the money that is being taken. And it sounds as if it's only in the Galilee, but no, it's everywhere. Certainly the scope and the extent varies, but it is very deep-rooted, and we need to understand, first and foremost, what the scope of this is. And there are several fundamental things I want to say. First of all, we cannot address this issue simply using existing tools, which means that we must think fundamentally to revisit how we open this game up to address this problem. And I will elaborate in a moment. Second, we have a problem, an in-depth problem in Arab society. I'll just give you one figure. And for many years, you were a senior prosecutor in this country, and you must understand what it means that almost 80% of murders in Arab Israeli society go unsolved. And when I say 80%, it means the other 25% also includes those men who murder their wives and who stay in the apartment until the police comes. Which means that murders are almost never solved, and there are many murder cases. So what does that mean? It means that the murderers and those who send them are out there, free, at large. And so the worst offense in the book of laws is not being solved. So, of course, you understand what happens with other offenses. So you said that, to use the euphemism, governance is lost. But either the state establishment rules or the criminals rule, and in the south, the criminals rule. And you cannot address it only using existing tools. When I entered office and when I brought a series of laws to the Knesset, I passed the law of minimum punishments, and you know that the courts don't like minimum punishments and they don't want their sort of discretion to be taken away from them. But because of all the illegal weapons in Arab society, we passed that law. But there were some things that I did not complete, some things I couldn't do, I couldn't finish doing. There were also extraordinary cases. For instance, I must place an emphasis on how we can solve more cases. Because minimum punishments won't make you solve crimes. That's true, minimum punishments won't solve crimes. But for instance, I brought to the Knesset a proposal, a bill, that maybe in routine times I would not have brought before the Knesset. That when a severe offense happens, when maybe evidence will be destroyed, the police will be allowed to search a place without a court order. Why? Because what's happening now is that the entire public sphere has cameras. There are homes with cameras, businesses with cameras, and many murder cases were solved this way. Eldad Perry's murder from Rehovot, his murder was solved this way. But in Arab society, I saw time and time again, and it was shown to me time and time again, that these videos, that the security camera footage are simply destroyed either by the perpetrators themselves or because this business owner doesn't want to be part of the investigation. So if the police or other forces, I think the ISA should also be more involved. We'll talk about that in a moment. We will not be able to win this war, and it is a war. Another thing is the scope of the police. The Israel police force is very small. Israel now has 9.5 million citizens. I'm not even talking about the terms and the different internal problems the Israel police force faces. But this force that is charged with regular policing tasks and also with public security is just spread too thin. It cannot deliver. And so we need to make it bigger. We need to have a national guard that responds to public security. And that's already happening because we understood after Guardian of the Walls that it needs to happen, but also local policing. Every serious Western city has local policing. Local authorities can also do it, so they don't investigate all offenses. But if you want to have community policing, if you want to have a sense of safety in the public sphere, this is essential. So all of this together will create a mass of police force that will give safety and security, and I think that public security on many levels is currently being hurt. Look, I'm a little frustrated with the thought that for so many years, in terms of police work, the Arab sector has been neglected without this Israeli general sector understanding what that means. Because the idea was, what's happening there in the village? They're murdering one another, so okay, what do I care? People don't understand that crime has a tendency that's imperialist. What starts in the village will tomorrow cross over to the adjacent city. So, will this approach and this neglect, years-long neglect, when there weren't even enough police stations in Arab communities, do you think that was one of the reasons why we've come this far? Yes. But also, criminal organizations, and do you know how these criminal organizations in Jewish society were addressed, or in Arab society, or in Jewish society? They are so strong, they have so many men, they are so technologically sophisticated, and in part some of them have actually been in the IDF. They have taken over more and more financial areas. They go into local authorities in the Arab and Druze sectors, whether indirectly they take over tenders, or directly they actually are in office in local authorities. And this is a situation that is an emergency situation as far as I'm concerned. And I must say that this government has identified the challenge, has begun to grapple with it. It is much more synchronized. It has synchronized the local authorities and the various law enforcement forces and the various ministries, more presence of police, more budgets, but we are still a long way. We have taken some baby steps. It's going to take a few years. And this campaign will be a very tough campaign, but we will need to use it. And we will have to use tools that we have not used to date. So in this context, with your permission, do you think that this change in government, the fact that over the last 5 or 6 years there have been so many governments, that has made this situation worse? It's a process that is gaining momentum over the last decade. It has been gaining momentum over the last decade. This political instability as we know it is a phenomenon that's been around over the last 3.5 years, give or take, and without a doubt it has been detrimental to government functioning in all areas. Once you once the systems are working, but they're not working the same way as they do in routine times and in election times, certainly here too it has implications. But I don't want to blame elections for that, because for many years there was government stability. There were governments that were in term for several years, but they still did not grapple with it. They didn't identify the depth of this problem, and they kind of brushed it, swept it under the carpet. And because I am very well acquainted with the Israeli security forces, there is a very big difference between the level of planning, national performance, working to goal in the security context when it comes to external threats and when it comes to threats within Israeli society. Within Israeli society, inwards, we are working in a less efficient, less effective, less focused, less correct way. Do you think in this context, and you actually are preaching to the choir, because should we have the ISA and all its fantastic capabilities that it's allowed to do, and it's an extraordinary capability it's allowed to use. And according to our social contract with an organization like the ISA, it's supposed to only tackle specific issues. But in view of what is happening in Arab society, and particularly in view of things like Guardian of the Walls, where, according to the chief of police at least, those who participated in fueling the fire were criminals for whom it was a win situation. Should the ISA go into it? And that's not a simple thing to do. Can you please give us the pros and cons of doing that? Look, in the current situation, it is a necessity. The ISA, the Shabak, is currently involved more than ever, and it is adhering to the legal interpretation of what the ISA law allows. So there are aspects that are not in question, but I think that we must take one step forward simply because I cannot see, without a change in the tools and intensity that we're using, that we can change the outcomes. And I must say that in Arab society too, there is an understanding that the stress is so great, and that the call upon the government by civilians, by citizens in Arab society who are helpless, who don't feel safe, who are anxious, and they don't know if their children will come back home after they go out to the street, or even if they go to a family event. It is in such a level that I believe that we will also gain consensus over it. It doesn't have to be unsupervised use of the ISA's capabilities, but there are certain capabilities it has that the police force does not have, and we must use them. So can we do that legally according to sort of emergency regulation? Because we saw that it was used when it came to something completely civilian, like fighting COVID at the beginning. Even though it was a very, it was a big bone of contention. Well, we used the technology of the ISA, and I supported it up to a point because it was life-saving. But at some point I felt that it was no longer the right thing to do. But initially, when we didn't have vaccines yet and so on, it saved lives, and I think that it was the right thing to do. But in this instance, well, a country is able to save lives, and it won't use this capability to save lives, and yes, you have to supervise it legally. But you have to know that the ISA is not too enthusiastic about doing this either. They also want to do it in a very limited fashion, and rightfully so. But if we define, to me, these criminal organizations are just like terror organizations, and for all intents and purposes, they are terror organizations that are crushing our society from within. And therefore, I think they should be addressed. It is war. As far as I'm concerned, if I can give you a likeness, it is just like Pablo Escobar's fight against with the drugs war. It is a war where civilians were killed by a cartel who were huge in magnitude. I don't know. I can say that there is a danger here, a huge risk, and we must grapple with it aggressively, with determination, and to dismantle them, and the ISA can help.
Thank you very much. I have many more questions, but I'm told that our time is up. Who is in charge of this here? It says our time is up. Is that correct? Well, thank you very much, Minister. Thank you. And I wish you a fruitful day ahead.